Welcome back. I'm your host, Derek Lambert of Myth Vision Podcast. I have a guest with us today, Karen de la Carriere. Welcome to Myth Vision.
Hey, Derek. Hey.
Thank you.
Cold day in Los Angeles, so I'm dressed up like an Alaskan.
Yeah. Well, at
Anyway.
least you have a coat, right? And in the case today we're discussing with Scientology, there's some people who may not even be able to afford a coat because so much money is coming out of their pockets to this cult. Do you mind telling us what exchange is? I mean, we have it, it's clear, as you said many times before, Scientology preaches fair exchange while thieving, ripping off, and extorting. Tell me what's going on with this exchange thing.
Scientology is world renowned for its money extortion, the racket. They are much more interested in your cash, your hard-earned cash. They're much more interested in that than your welfare. They got you in, and now they want to raid your bank accounts. And they're trained. They can push your buttons. They can do anything to get that cash. Now, the reason I mentioned the word exchanges, look how hypocritical. They got a website preaching exchange. And they're saying that you'll prosper if you follow their advice on being ethical and giving exchange. Now, let's just look at this, Derek. Exchange is simply someone gives you something and you give something back. It's a two-way flow, right? You get something. I'm sure you've got people that love your website and have learned a few things and enjoy the images and enjoy these PhDs in academics. But so far, they haven't even given you $5.
Right.
$5. But they get off on watching. That's what we call non-exchange. That's not fair. If you get something, you give something back. Now, Scientology preach that you should give fair exchange. Codswallop, nonsense, rubbish. They give nothing. In fact, their exchange is sometimes diabolical. I want to mention Lisa Marie, this beautiful child who was thrust at me at 9 years old to do Scientology counseling. She inherited $100 million from Elvis Presley Enterprises. I don't know, Derek. I can only guess how much the Scientology vultures extorted from her. And I want Scientology to disclose, if they argue and think this is Karen's exaggeration, show how much she gave Scientology. Multi-millions. For what, Derek? What was the exchange?
That's why this picture speaks 1,000 words of what she said about Scientology.
That was her statement.
Yep.
They were taking
my soul, my money, my everything.
My everything. Good girl that she departed 10 years before she died. At least she came out of the mindset. At least she was smart enough to wake up. But how can a church, Derek, give me a couple of wise words. How can a church take millions from someone who then dies at a young age due to drugs and misery and depression? How can that be, Derek? How can that be?
So not all churches are the same, if that makes sense. There are TV evangelists who will feed you. They do feed lies, and they will say, if you send $1,000 in, God will multiply it 100-fold, and you will get $100,000 for sending us 1,000. If you could send 100, you'll get 10,000. If you send 50, you'll get 5,000, or whatever. They make up numbers, but they say that what you give in, it's a similar kind of format of exchange, right? They have this teaching that if you give in, you're going to get so much more than what you gave in. And oftentimes that's actually baloney. If you hit someone who's already a hardworking, successful individual, and they somehow bought into this and they said, oh, wow, my business is growing. I mean, maybe they can be duped into thinking that the reason I'm having success, karma's on my side, I'm having good luck or whatever, is because I blessed this church. But I could imagine the exchange program that you're describing here with Scientology is the same manipulative thing that is being used in a different way, the cans, and they're psychologically getting you to buy the whole hook and or the bait and switch, as you called it, that they get sucked in. And these TV preachers, they do anything they can to get you to mail that check off, to send that money to them.
Perfectly spoken. Derek, Scientology gives a slightly different spin or a slightly different promise. They're not saying you will get prosperous when you send us $100. We'll do a prayer, a special prayer for you. Send $1,000. We will do a prayer that God will answer. That's the scam. In Scientology, they promise you phenomenally good health, phenomenally good moods and emotions, happiness, joyfulness.
Their website literally says that. Like, if you read on here, it literally is trying to tell you, right, principles of prosperity and health. But you also have some data that seems to run contrary to these claims.
Well, over and over again, you hear of some Scientologists that did everything they were asked, and they did. Let's cover the story of Whitney in Clearwater. How old was she? Like, I think she was 34, something. A real estate agent, successful, easily gave them $1 million, went up to the highest level. Even the Daily Mail covered that. OT8.
Just to show them so they can actually see Mills reach the highest level of Scientology.
Right. Highest level. Wow. That means for at least a couple of years, she audited these attached spirits, which Scientology says you are not a single spirit inhabiting a body. You got like hundreds of thousands, millions of attached ghost spirits stuck to different body parts in you. And she would have exercised herself for 2 years on these attached spirits. Then she gets to OT8. And according to media, she did superpower 1 month before the catastrophe. Derek, you tell what happened to her. What was the catastrophe? Please cover setting it up and the gunshot. And Derek, she had what's called baby watch. Baby watch means there are guards around you. They knew she was suicidal, so they had bodyguards, Scientologists guarding her in case she became too reckless. But they left her with a loaded gun? So then, go ahead, Derek, finish the story.
Right, yeah, let me read to you what is being said here and emphasize what Karen is saying. Built into the theology, if we will, of Scientology is there is a promise. It isn't a possibility. If they have a rigorous system by which you rank up to higher OT levels, you are ridding yourself of these negative, bad, what they call thetans. And so here's what the particularly Daily Mail says, Scientologist real estate agent who thought she was battling Lyme disease set fire to herself and shot herself dead after saying she wanted to drop the body, which followers believe allows their Thetan to live on. And they say Whitney Mills, a 40-year-old real estate agent deeply involved in Scientology, shot herself on May 12th and later died. Mills reached the highest level in Scientology, known as operating Thetan level 8 or OT8 in 2019. OT8 Scientologists believe that they have gained control over matter, energy, and space. That's what they're selling you. And time, and are immune to disease. Clearwater Police Department says Mills was suffering from a number of health issues, I believe it, including Lyme disease and depression. So imagine the cognitive dissonance of being told by the true religion that you practice. I put that in quotation marks because you are convinced. I mean, remember, if you haven't seen our other interviews with Karen, she tells us how she actually believed the story when she hit OT8, finding out about Xenu and the whole nine. Like, she actually believed it because you put all this time and energy. You can't imagine that this is all science fiction made up. You believe it. And here she is believing in something, is in a rank where she shouldn't have this disease, shouldn't think this way, should have control of matter, time, space, the whole nine. Yet she ends up committing suicide and she's wanting to drop the body. She's so sucked into it. So false promises, cognitive dissonance, all sorts of things seem to be going on here. And this isn't just on the Daily Mail that you shared with me, Karen. The Guardian has this as well, just to get people on board here. The Church of Scientology has unveiled its new superpower building, right? Now, this is actually covering what you and I have shown before, that they're selling more powers to Scientologists. Buy this and you'll have the super quadrant pastime machine with the, I mean, come on. So it's definitely a con, of course. There is the man with the plan, right? The guy who started this science fiction that is the gospel to poor people like her who got duped into it. So there's my rundown there, Karen.
Derek, you know, I would like some of the audience to laugh at me when you said I believed in all this. You know, it was incredulous, but because of the indoctrination, I believed that possibly I was not high enough. I was not sensitive enough to get it. If I had slight doubts creeping in, I would think, that's that negative VT. There's probably some spirits there that are trying to make me disbelieve.
Right.
So this is just laughable now, but denying these incredulous stories of the volcano and the electronic ribbon and being sucked in and being frozen in glycol. If I ever thought this sounds like sci-fi, which I did think, I would think, I got an SPBT.
You know what's really something that you say really makes me wonder, and I know that you have to have thought of this. You know, L. Ron Hubbard and the program of Scientology, this religion, as he likes to call it, it sells you that you're going to get healthier, you're going to have powers, you're going to overcome space, time, and matter. But a serious question I have is, the day that Tom Cruise starts to get decrepit, getting older, having ailments, getting sick, might have to have a liver transplant, whatever. I'm curious to know how his cognitive dissonance is going to work. How is he going to try to make sense of him reaching the levels that he has and the depth that he has, yet he himself comes to see his mortality and how his health is deteriorating? How's Scientology going to help you then, buddy? I mean,
well, his end was very, very bad. He asked for his caretaker to build him an electric shock machine, a suicide machine.
Mm.
So after writing all this thing and starting a new religious movement, he wanted to die by the very thing that he had preached. The evil of psychiatry was, look, the electric shock people. They're criminal. They fry the brain. Now, I do believe electric shock is harmful. That part I do believe. I mean, people, where's the evidence that electric shock made you bright and sparkly? No.
Yeah.
But that's not the point. The point here is he said over and over again, psychiatry was evil. Look at the electric shock. And then Hubbard himself, oh God, it was such an earthquake in my universe. It was the Truman Show.
Right.
When Marty Blackburn, I would meet with him secretly in a hotel at the airport. When he told me, this was long before it became public knowledge, I had literally an explosion. I had spent 35 years of my life believing in all this. And Hubbard wanted to kill himself with electric shock. Did you know that?
Right.
That was,
you told me this in a previous episode.
All covered in the book Going Clear. And then they made a movie about it, Going Clear. Alex Gibney. So this is and the cult never denies this, and the cult never
I'm
Derek,
wondering what Tom Cruise will start thinking when his health deteriorates. Will he? I mean, he seems completely brainwashed on it, but yeah, it just makes me wonder.
Yeah. So anyway, we're looking at the hypocrisy of preaching exchange.
Mm-hmm.
They took a huge amount of money from Whitney. And then, were you going to finish what she did to herself? She set herself.
So
right. Go ahead.
I thought I said that. Yeah. So she set herself. So yeah.
With a loaded gun.
Yes. So she shot herself. And of course caught herself on fire. Mills set herself on fire and shot herself, dying a day and a half later. So that's pretty crazy. I mean, how far do you want to go to take your life in your OT8? I mean, you're promised this religious freedom from this thing. And that's scary because at the end, the fact that they're saying at the end she wanted to drop this body, she's so trapped in their thinking. And you know what that's like, Karen, that she can't escape it. But their promise fell flat on its face. False promises. Just make sure you pay me.
So while Scientology tout their philosophy of you're only ethical and moral when you give equivalent to what you get, your exchange must be there. While they tout that and spout that, the way they handle SEAL members, slave them 60-hour weeks, 80-hour weeks. But if they leave, if they want out after 20 years, no medical insurance, no pension, no 401k, nothing. They leave with not. Well, no, they're embarrassed because people would live under a bridge as a homeless person. So now they give them $500. They give $500 goodbye pay for having worked 20 years, 30 years, whatever.
Yeah,
but they're preaching exchange. They're preaching exchange. Now, I want to move on to Mike Rinder, a dear friend of mine. And you know Mike Rinder, he's graced your channel with some sizzling stuff, very high out. That video was a runaway exchange.
you.
Mike Rinder was on the Apollo at 18 years old. And he went there for training, but they kind of corralled and kidnapped him. And then he was on there the next 35 years. And Derek, he slaved for them. He did.
Yeah.
He did. 60-hour weeks, 80-hour weeks. And he was brutalized. he told on Australian TV how he was violently punched by Miscavige.
Introduces his trusted lieutenant, Mike Rinder, to a 2004 Scientology event. Rinder claims David Miscavige physically assaulted him many times. David Miscavige, the leader of Scientology, creeping up behind you and strangling you. Did that happen?
Absolutely. It happened more than once. He's a very volatile personality. He will lash out for uncalled for reasons. 50
to 100 times, just violently and brutally assaulted, and you can't hit back. It's like if the Pope slapped you, it would be like hitting the Pope, you know. So I want you to read this excerpt because it shows Scientology exchange. Mike Rinder worked, and then he was the church spokesman for 20 years. He was on call. He had to get up. If he was called 2 a.m, get on that plane at 5 and at 6 that leaves for London. He was a complete and utter slave. But he believed in the bigger picture. We're helping mankind.
Right.
So please read the paragraph I sent you.
Okay. So this is from his this is from his book, A Billion Years, page 189. Miscavige arrived after we had been standing in the dark for about 20 minutes and informed us we were being offloaded from the Sea Org on a bus the next morning because we were hopelessly incompetent and counter-intentioned cocksuckers. To outsiders, this might sound like this would be a blessing, an end to the insanity. But to a Sea Org member, this was the ultimate humiliation. And it would also mean the end of our relationships with any Scientologist, including any family members. He was once again making clear that he completely controlled everyone's fate, and that with a snap of his fingers, your life as you knew it could end.
That was daily treatment till finally he left with the shirt on his back and nothing else. You do reach a threshold. You reach a threshold. And Michael often talked in the book of how he had to live in some camp in the desert and put on his clothes the next day, talk to an audience of 2,000, 3,000 people as if life was good, and then go right back to either the dungeon, what they called SP hole, or living. And you have learned from so many academics. What do you think when you hear stories like this?
I mean, honestly,
does it compare to anything else? I mean, Jehovah's Witnesses are pretty, but they don't force you to live in the wilderness.
Yeah, as far as like where they're in a coercive kind of situation, I'm reminded of maybe certain Mormon LDS cults where women are forced to marry family members or even sister wife situations. I'm reminded of Jim Jones in a way, not quite, but like Compound, where they have a compound where you're not allowed out. Nobody knows what's going on unless you infiltrate it. There is no mass suicide, but it's not far off from who knows what will happen to these people. I'm also kind of thinking in a weird way of the Inquisition, not completely, but like there's a systematic way of finding heretics. And you remember the Salem witch trials, and like there were witch trials back in the early Americas where they thought these little girls were witches, and just strange superstitions that are built within this corrupted mindset theologically that L. Ron Hubbard has probably kind of planted those seeds through his literature, making people like Miscavige really capitalize on these kind of things. And so, yeah, those are a couple of things that come to mind.
Also, how could Hubbard, if he was such a genius, let it all fall to a psychotic like Miscavige? How can that even be? A genius sets up, the change of power, sets up some checks and balances. Miscavige is a madman, a madman. But what I wanted to ask you was, when you did a little comparison there, what about the assault and battery, the punching, the humiliation of being sucked? There are so many. I don't know if you've ever talked to Jefferson Hawkins, and he really covers the beatings body slamming from Miscavige. How can a religious leader be allowed to do so much assault and battery? Do you have any other religion where the head honcho can punch and slam and body slam and punch in the gut and knock the wind out of someone? Does that happen?
I don't know of any that do that specific thing. The closest thing, and I could be, there's probably someone out there, I'm pretty sure there are, but what it reminds me of in a different way is the religious cult leaders who are sexually perverted in some way, that they go and they want multiple wives. Usually cults always have multiple wives, and they're abusive in those kind of relationships, enforcing some of these things to take place and happen. I can't imagine that everything is completely, just total voluntary in every respect. Some of these cases seem to be with the threat of violence. I don't know if violence has taken place. I'm thinking of down in Texas, the well-known cult that the building got burned down and the guy was sleeping with all the women. And what is it? Can't think of his name right now, but anyway, there's lots of these cults where they take advantage of these kind of things. But as far as David Koresh, yeah, I was thinking of him. I can't imagine everyone. Maybe they were so duped into this that they thought it was normal and it was okay because he's the prophet. But I don't know anyone else who just physically goes around beating people, and I just don't know.
It's incredulous to me the way Scientology cannibalized their own.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of the psychology behind it. Tell me if you agree, Derek. I think the message being sent is, if we punish the hell out of you, you're going to do better. I think that, because why on earth would anyone take their willing slave, who are not allowed to have babies, not allowed to have a day off, get little to no pay, get absolutely, the cult uses is the government. CO members are sent to free, there's always free medical for hobos and indigents, and student doctors train on, the student doctors that train, their first surgery is done on a freebie.
Yeah.
Indigents and hobos and all that, they can't pay. So
Right.
Student doctors can practice on them. And USC, University of Southern California, just down the road there, they have this. But you have to sit on a bench with hobos for 6 hours while a student doctor eventually gets to you. And that's where they send CO members for free medical.
Right.
They're sitting with $3 billion, Derek. But they won't pay for medical. You go to freebie places. All the abortions that they did for 25 years, forced, coerced abortions, were done by Planned Parenthood, which is paid by the US government.
Right.
So again, it's a freebie. You don't pay Planned Parenthood. They will abort the baby for nothing. And that's where Scientology sent that. So what would be the reason to be so punitive? The thought behind it is, if we whip you, you'll perform better. So it's management by punishment.
Right.
Can
I
you
think
think
that
of any other
the only analogy I can make right now, and I'm because you're into what you study at the moment and the things you think about, is the only reason anyone would want to behave and do the right thing is that they believe they're going to go to hell and be punished for all eternity. So when you teach this idea within Christianity or Judaism or certain forms of Judaism, very little, but there may be some forms that have this idea, but Islam for sure, they teach you will go to hell and burn forever. And it is a way to control the behavior of the people. And in some cases, you might find monks, ascetics, people who aren't, part of the normal crowd, whipping themselves, wearing uncomfortable clothing, weird things like that throughout history because they're trying to maintain the right kind of behavior and how they should be. That's the only analogy I can get. And in this case, it's a bit different, but if you can scare the hell out of them, then maybe they won't go to hell, right? Well, if you abuse them, I imagine they think psychologically this will keep them silent, this will keep them cooperative, obedient, things like that. And that's how I'm seeing that.
There's no heaven or hell in Scientology.
Right. I'm just using an analogy that some people say, the people that I engage with sometimes that are fundamentalists, that I want to try and get them to educate themselves, they will say stuff like, what's the point? There's no purpose. Why can't I do whatever I want since there's no heaven or hell to worry about? Then I can do whatever I want. And so they want to teach, well, the reason I won't do that is that God's going to punish me and burn me forever in hell. And I would say that if you believe in that kind of God, then in a way you have a David Miscavige God that is going to punish and burn people for all eternity. And so it's a different analogy because God's not necessarily beating you, but if your life is hard and you're struggling and you end up with diseases, or you're poor and you're always getting the bad end of the stick, you're always having a tough karma, if you will, to use an analogy, then maybe God is punishing you, but he's going to reward you one day in heaven. Maybe. Or maybe, as some people thought, you need to stop because you're secretly sinning somehow. So the reason you're getting punished is God's punishing you because you're sinning, or your parents sinned and you're getting all of the sins now in your life, and it's like a punishment. So that's the only analogy I would have compared it to that I'm aware of. I'm sure there are cults out there where their leaders beat the crap out of people into submission.
Very good, Derek. Those are excellent points. So I'm excited to do the next video with you, Derek, but I want to end off on one sentence, just one sentence, which you can think about. Scientology, and now I'm quoting, I didn't originate this.
Right.
A wonderful hero in Scientology is a woman called Paulette Cooper, who was fair-gamed. They wanted her to have a mental breakdown. They say they're anti-psychiatry, but they want psychiatric punishments. They behave worse than any psychiatrist. So the sentence Paulette said that I want to end off this video on is, Scientology is worse than anything you ever imagined. As we leak out a little this and that, if you don't agree with that on the spot, you will agree. This is a warning, beware. Scientology is worse than anything you even imagine. Spoken from a gullible fool who believed in it all and trained up, did everything they asked to class 12CS. For 35 years, I was this dupe. Maybe I had a brain aneurysm.
I don't feel bad, Karen. I did it too. I was speaking in tongues and jibber jabbering and rolling on the floor and thinking that I was literally in the presence and all this stuff. Like, I know what it means to really believe. I know what it means.
Yeah. Well, thank you for staying with us and learning some things, and especially thank you to this Mythovision channel. This is unraveling the lies and unraveling how we can believe. When you believe, you are screwed. You've lost all your critical thought. Now you keep your exchanging and become a patron, even if it's just a little. Help support the channel. Don't be a rip-off. Don't enjoy and give no exchange. Give some exchange and you'll feel better. Bye-bye, everyone. Till the next video. Take care.
Thank you.